I'm on a delay, I think.
I can't tell if we're live. Yeah, Matt, you must be on a delay, right?
Ramy,
are we?
Here I am,
we
but
are
I think
live.
We're live. Okay. Well, welcome to Vancouver Real Estate Live. We're here with Adam Scalina and Dr. Andrey Pavlov.
Yes. Professor of Finance, BD School of Business at SFU. Thank you so much for coming tonight, and we appreciate you having a beer with us and joining us. And we were actually just talking before we went live. You're low carb. You don't really drink too much beer.
So before we go there, I need to state that I did not know there will be beer before I came. Right? So,
or you would have taken the bus.
That's right. But yeah, there's that joke. In theory, there is no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is. So we're looking at the practice here, you know. So yeah, that low carb thing is more theory than practice, but yes.
You know what's it's the other thing that we should point out is Adam, because we've pitched this now. This is the fourth time we've done this. We've done it 4 months in a row, and we always say, "Okay, come have a beer, hang out with us, and have a beer." And Adam's having a dry January, so this is basically
strictly decorative. This is water in here.
We'll see how long that lasts.
Yes.
If my wife is watching, this is water. Yeah, this is. No, but thank you for coming on. A lot of our guests know who you are, but can you maybe talk a little bit about yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, certainly. So I'm a finance prof at Simon Fraser University at the BD School of Business, and. But most of my research is in real estate finance, real estate markets. And being placed here in Vancouver, you know, it has piqued my interest. And you know, how could you not be in real estate in Vancouver, right? It's so important and so controversial. So lately I've started doing more of a public outreach and, you know, sort of engagement as being the engaged university. So yeah, I have been studying real estate for a while.
You seem to be the guy at SFU now. Oh, well, you have been for quite some time, but you're speaking to the media a lot. Tom Davidoff seems to be kind of the UBC.
Total different perceptions on.
But same but different, Matt. Like there's similarities, but then also. You guys work together on certain projects.
So that's why I like
a lot of people
Tom,
think you guys are adversaries in a lot of ways. But
no, but that's the beauty of it. We're personally great friends. You know, I absolutely consider him a friend, and we disagree on a lot of things. More so lately with real estate, especially in Vancouver. But that's a good thing, because then, if we actually agree on something, that means that there's something to it, right?
Right.
So, and it does happen. People say it doesn't happen, it does happen, and that's a great outcome, I think.
So before, I have one more question, university related, but we should say there's 16 people watching right now.
Oh,
so welcome to our room. We're going to try even more engagement than this time. If you have a question for Andrey Pavlov or us or all of us or a comment, we're going to throw some questions to the audience. Chime in here. I got the computer in front of me. I'm watching, but the question I had about the university, going back to that, is, you know how say the University of Chicago has like a very specific ideological bent? Is there the same thing in SFU, UBC, or is there any sort of ideological, like SFU skews this way, UBC skews that way, or is it just kind of a mixture, and it's just interesting that you guys see eye to eye on some things, not eye to eye on others, and you're at different schools?
I wouldn't say there is an ideological bent. I think we both, I mean, everyone has their views, and yes, some are more to the left, some are more to the right. Many are in the center, like I see myself, right? Kind of balanced and in the center, right? It's a joke. You're supposed to laugh. You're supposed to laugh here, right?
The center puts you on the right, though.
Anyway, so yeah, I don't think it's about schools. I think it's more about personal history and views. And, you know, I mean, we have to acknowledge that I come from Bulgaria. I grew up under socialism. I know what socialism does to people. and to economists, and I'm incredibly watchful for the creeping up socialism that we're getting here in this province, and I probably raise my voice louder than I should on that. But in my view, that's hugely important, because people have forgotten, it seems, the damage that socialism did in the Eastern Bloc countries, and it's my job to remind them.
Yeah, well, and just as before we get into anything real estate related, the one thing that we talk about all the time, and I feel like I say this all the time, is the people that say with Airbnbs in a condo, that's an encroachment on the restrictions against Airbnbs is an encroachment on property rights. Like the people that are the most fiercely vocal and against any sort of restriction, almost to a person, are former Eastern Bloc.
That's so interesting.
I have a client from Poland, and he is like the most. You'd think he's very market oriented to the point of like the extreme market oriented. But that's exactly what he says. You didn't grow up where I grew up, and if you did, you'd understand why I'm so outspoken.
Well, that's right. So that's part of it, and absolutely right. But the other part is I'm also an economist, and have taken a course or two and written a paper or two on economics, and then obviously there you think through. The big deal about economics is that you think through the responses people have to any action. So a lot of governments think, oh, we can fix this by just prohibiting Airbnb. Well, yeah, but then people respond, right? So you have to think through what will be the response, and the response may very well be you're just going to build less, because now there's you've restricted property rights, you've made real estate less desirable, so you're going to build less. So at the end, that doesn't really help affordability. It does penalize the current property owners, it does do that, but having been trained to think through the responses individuals would have to any policy helps me a great deal with this kind of issues and discussions.
Right. Yeah. Well, maybe we should go. So we have a couple things we definitely want to talk to you about tonight, but we also want to throw to the people watching. There's now 17 watching. Somebody new showed up, so welcome.
Welcome.
We want to talk about the last half of 2019 first, because the last time we had a live event was December 15th.
We touched a little bit on stats, but now the stats are actually in for December 2019. And I just want to highlight a couple things before we start asking some questions here. But 88% sales increase over December 2018. So huge increase.
Almost a 90%
activity.
Increase.
9.5% above the 10-year average in terms of sales activity. And then we also saw a 16% decrease in inventory from December 2018. So interesting numbers, really interesting numbers, and a really active December in our market, and an active last two quarters in 2019 for sure.
Basically, I would say a surge over the last half of 2019. The other thing that, and this is, I was just looking at this, I don't have it in front of me, but I remember from a discussion I had earlier today. So we were, in October, we were saying Mount Pleasant's at 75% sales ratio, right? So 7.5 out of 10 properties are selling. In December, downtown, in the 500 to 600, 600 to 700, and 700 to 800 range, so anything under 800K basically downtown, it was 75% sales ratio or above. So we were firing on kind of easily 2017 numbers, sales ratios there. Yeah. So the question that we have, and Haram Lee says hi. Hi, Haram. We have a question for the audience, and maybe we'll ask Andrey first. Was the last half of 2019 a surprise?
It was a bit of a surprise to me. I expected numbers to improve, but not quite to that extent. Clearly, people have been sitting on the sidelines, wondering what else would the current government do, and then eventually, there's only so long you can put life on hold, right? Kids get born, families get formed, and then people need a place to live. So clearly people start moving in. And then the moment you see a few properties that you've been watching for a while get sold, now you're in a panic mode and you jump in on the next opportunity. So there's this effect. Now, to be honest, to be fair, we need to acknowledge that interest rates did go down in the second half of 2019, and then so that clearly helped.
And sentiment around interest rates seemed to go down. Like
That's
there was,
right.
In the first quarter, there was almost a fear of that we might be entering into increased rates or different territory. And then by the end of the year, it was like, we're going to see negative.
No one's talking about it, And then at the same time, the economy is doing pretty well.
Right.
Especially, I mean, not just in Canada, but also in the States. So when you have job growth and income growth and dropping interest rates, or expectation of that, people act, and this is one of the ways they act.
So one of the interesting things, and this is just how the psychology of markets, I guess, what struck me about the shift from, say, May, June to July, August, was how it almost seemed, like looking back, it almost seemed to turn on a dime, right? Like we were, March, April, I was thinking, okay, what's going to happen here? Like I remember March we had a lot of listings in the spring. We were doing open houses where you'd get it was a decent turnout, 2-3 groups, and there were people that were walking by, like it was not serious buyers. And we were having those discussions, or at least in real estate offices, like what if we reduce by $50K, that might not change anything.
No.
Right? Like there's just not there. People aren't buying, and then almost just like that, suddenly there's increases month over month. Like it's amazing how quickly the psychology changes. And
but I was just curious, and not to cut you off, Matt, but we kind of had this conversation before, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, Andrey, but the herd mentality, is it stronger in markets that are maybe more volatile or more expensive? Like I'm just thinking, like in Vancouver, when the tap turns off, it turns off drastically, like just in a heartbeat, right? And then when it seems like when people rush back,
it's like
to purchasing, it's a pile on. Do you see that in a Winnipeg? Do you see that in other, you know what I mean, in softer or in more kind of consistent markets?
So when you turn off the tap, I think that's pretty typical. Transactions just drop and quite suddenly. Because you can't take properties off the market. So you still have these properties, you have the supply, but demand drops, and then immediately you have a huge drop in transactions. But when, in normal markets, when you see increases in demand, like we're seeing here today, the action is not quite so sudden and so severe, because people expect supply will increase. In Vancouver, we know there's hardly any supply, and suddenly that supply is to the max and very tightly controlled by City Hall and by availability of rent. So then people are like, well, there's no matter what demand does, there is not going to be any new supply. So if I want a place, I've got to act, and it's one of the properties that's on the market now. We're not going to get any or very much new housing.
Right. So there's been a couple comments here. Jeffman 8000 in response to, was the last half of 2019 a surprise? Lack of quality inventory surprised me big time.
Yeah.
So a few things about the level of inventory. Why do you guys think the inventory, quality inventory is...
Quality inventory is the exact way to put it, I think.
Because, there's still, if you look in like Grandview right now, there's still a decent number of houses for sale,
but
it's just insane, right? But why in your guys' mind was inventory or quality inventory so low in the last half of 2019? I have some thoughts on this as well.
So there's a pretty established pattern that in up markets everything sells, good and bad, and in down markets only the best properties sell, and the poor quality properties don't sell. They just don't sell. So then when you have a down market for a couple of years, the good properties were still selling. Transactions were low, but they were not zero.
Yeah.
But the poor quality properties were accumulating, right? So then when you do that for a couple of years, boom, now we're in a situation where none of those poor quality properties have been selling. We see a lot more of them. Now, it is a very good point that the good quality properties are not really in the inventory. So maybe if you look at the total mixture, you're going to have a higher percentage of poor quality properties. But I agree with this gentleman that it is a surprise why we do not see high quality properties. And I think it is expectation on behalf of the sellers that there aren't very many of them in Vancouver to begin with, and eventually they're going to be able to sell at much higher price.
Yeah.
And why list now? Why jump into this market?
Well, we've kind of touched on this a little bit on the show, but the idea of the investor grade versus the owner occupied property as well. I find in downturns, often people that are living in the homes and taking care of the homes and own the tier 1, tier 2 type properties, they often just don't sell. They wait for better days, right? Yeah. Where investors that are maybe speculating in the market or have been holding and renting it for a number of years, and they feel that the market's shifting, they might try to liquidate their inventory, which usually is more beat up, maybe not as well maintained, and then it comes on the market. And so I don't know if there's maybe a justification to that theory or not, the end user type product versus the investor grade type product, but
yeah, well, one thing's for sure, right? We had, and I'm thinking of a couple specific guests over the last couple of years, but the real doomsday types that we had on the podcast, like there was going to be blood in the streets by now, right? Like there was going to be people that had to sell, that couldn't sell. There was going to be foreclosures. And what I've seen, and this is just with, I would say our clients, there's a bunch of questions. We're going to get to these questions, but I just want to finish the thought here. Is at least with our clients, for the most part, people that were considering selling in 2019, like they didn't have to sell. Yeah. So they just held off and to wait for better times. And it seems like that's almost across the board. So I guess the question would be, what's inventory going to be like in 2019? But we should get to these. So 19 people are watching right now. Imperator, I hope I'm saying your name right, 7777 said in regards to was the last half of 2019 a surprise? No, it was not a surprise. Just imagine how much real estate will go up when the socialist NDP is gone. I think they showed up for you, Andrey.
Yeah. I love the when rather than if. Yes.
Okay, C2009, or C2009, I guess, Y, has a question for Professor Pavlov. And actually, this is, we were going to pose this question to the room, so everyone weigh in here if you have any responses. Hello, question for Professor Pavlov. How do you think the impact of local rental control will affect the short-term and long-term housing prices in Metro Vancouver? Actually, so not rental prices, housing prices.
That is so interesting, yeah. That's an excellent question because, I mean, people ask me all the time, how does rent control affect rental properties or renters themselves but actually that is a fantastic question. It's something I haven't thought much about. How do rent controls impact the housing market for owner-occupied? And it all goes back to the fact that rent controls limit rent supply. And we see that in Vancouver, like we've been undersupplying purpose-built rentals for years and years. And sure, today the CMHC report came out and said, there's a few buildings in the works. So there's clearly going to be increase in supply, not yet, but it's coming online in the next year or two. Still, vacancy rate is dismal, right? It did go up. It went up from 1% to 1.1%.
And that's
a big deal, right?
And that's with the outlawing of Airbnb, which apparently was going to have a glut.
Yes.
There was the empty homes tax, which apparently was going to be a glut.
Right. So, but that's the thing. As I said at the beginning, people adjust. So whatever the government does, people will adjust inevitably. You can't stop water from flowing down, right? Yeah. It will find a way. People find a way. And these measures are completely ineffective. But going back to the impact on owner-occupied housing, it is a good point that those markets are clearly related. So when you make it impossible to rent because you have introduced rent control and broken the market, so there's no availability, well then the choice is between kind of like living on the street, living really far, right? Something inconvenient or suboptimal, or you have to buy, right? So it actually all these rent control measures, even though they appear to be helping renters, they're not. They're hurting renters. And when you hurt renters, you're pushing people into buying more. So yeah, there's that connection. That's an excellent point.
So if I understand, rent controls, if I understood your last point there, rent controls actually potentially lead to more people becoming homeowners.
Yeah, absolutely. Because rent control limits the supply of rental properties, right?
Yeah.
So then if you can't find adequate rental, well, buying is your only choice if you can afford it, or moving. It's either you buy or you move, right? If you can't find a place, what else are you going to do, right? So yeah, rent control actually is a positive, except for people who need this basement suite or a laneway house or something to make ends meet. Obviously, they're going to be hurting because it's difficult to be in the rental market. So they will struggle, but nevertheless, so maybe they'll buy a smaller property, something cheaper, right? But so there are going to be people who are going to be hurt that way. But nevertheless, yeah, rent controls break the rental market. That pushes more people into owner-occupied. So yeah, I think that link is very interesting, and it's an excellent point.
So who, if anyone, is rent control good for?
I don't think it's good for anyone.
No.
Well, it's maybe good for people who are in place, renting a building currently, renting a place currently, right? And they have no plans to move, right?
Yeah.
So if you're there, it's like winning the lottery, right?
Yeah.
You do get benefits there, but and even that is questionable, because the moment you introduce rent control, the way we have it here in British Columbia, you eliminate any incentive on behalf of the property owner to maintain or improve the property, right?
Well, and presumably, you also introduce an idea for people that have really good rent to potentially not move.
That's right. So you cannot move,
for employment, for there's all sorts of reasons why you kind of make life static for people that have good rent. Like that happens in New York City, right? Like rent control is like, if you have one of those rent controlled buildings where it's really cheap, it's like a lifelong, you're stuck.
Yeah, you're stuck. But so we're seeing that here. So those may be the people that benefit, but those are people who are not anticipating any change in their personal circumstances. So no new job that's further away, so that you might want to move. No family, no growing or shrinking family. Whatever it is, that's what you're going to do.
Right.
That's a pretty small group of people, right? Everyone else is hurting, and in particular, renters are hurting because you limit new supply, and then you make it even more difficult to move or for new people coming to find a place. It really hurts renters overall.
Right. Okay, we'll get to some other questions here. The other thing, well, you know what? Let's go to these questions.
Yeah,
I got my own questions, but I think these questions are better. Okay, so we have Dale Fair writes, would it be the situation in Hong Kong that made sales jump and then others think the market's turned? Okay, so that's interesting. So the last half of 2019, we see a huge surge. What is the impact of the protests in Hong Kong, if any? You from kind of Andrey from a large perspective, Adam from on the ground.
Well, I'd be curious to hear the on the ground perspective, but there are a couple of, you would think there is an effect, right? But first of all, the Hong Kong protest started much earlier than the rebound, and there was no effect for a while. That's okay, people may take a while to act. But the other thing is, so there's apparently 300,000 Canadian citizens living in Hong Kong, right? Yeah. So if they come to Vancouver, that's a huge jump, right? That can certainly account for the jump we're seeing. The problem is that many of them, those who are relatively well off, they probably already own a place here in Vancouver, right? So the question is, what is that additional net demand, right? And then the other thing is, if they don't own a place in Vancouver, would they choose Vancouver as their target city, right? Because it's a big world, there's great cities all over the place, and in Vancouver we have signaled one way or another that we really don't like homeowners in general, but especially investors in particular. So when you do that, it's not clear that if you're choosing a city now, you're gonna choose Vancouver.
Right.
But what are the facts on the ground?
Before we get to the ground, let's say put it out to everyone out there. There's now 22 people watching. We're at 24.
Welcome.
2 people don't want to talk about Hong Kong. Adam's going to give you his impression about Hong Kong, but I'd love to hear other people's thoughts in the chat here about Hong Kong.
I think. Well, first of all, I agree with you. I think a lot of people from Hong Kong already own property in either Toronto or Vancouver in the marketplaces. So I don't know how much of an uptick I think that had, but if anything, it was kind of what happens in Vancouver when people are on the fence and monitoring the media. Is a story like Hong Kong coming to Vancouver might nudge home buyers off the fence.
It's like a warm hug.
It's
right?
like the warm hug of like, oh right, we're in huge demand, and I might miss out on an opportunity if a flood of foreigners come and buy, or even people that have Canadian citizenship come and buy up in the market with money, right? I think that's a big thing. Is it was positive news about the market in a sea of horrible news. Do you know what I mean? Like it was kind of so. From that perspective, I think it maybe did have a positive impact. I had a lot of people that don't know much about Hong Kong asking me about Hong Kong in the last quarter of 2019, right? Who are thinking of buying and selling.
Right.
Sellers saying, hey, is my place worth more now because we're on the radar for, and the answer was no. And buyers saying, do I need to worry and get in? So.
Well, this actually goes to kind of something that I've been thinking about for a long time, and I'd be curious to hear Andrey's thoughts on this, is that what Adam talked about, this kind of is something that Vancouver always comes back to, right? Like social and political stability in a sea of kind of chaos around the world. And that's what everyone keeps telling themselves, and it seems to generally be proven true. But what about the historic... Like, what does the historic market, how does that impact the current market? Like, we always say there's like a bedrock confidence. That's why I think inventory was down. There's a bedrock confidence amongst people that have owned Vancouver property for some time, right? And it seems like that kind of deep-seated confidence, looking at what the market's done over the last 15, 20 years or longer, really plays into the current market, right? Like Hong Kong, like that's like in people's mind it was like 1995 or like there's like a well of examples of when properties spiked that they can draw on. Is that something in every market? Is that specific to our market?
So the predictions I've made over the past year were I have no idea what's going to happen in the short run. And so I did not anticipate, as I said, I did not anticipate the jump in transactions that we saw in the second half of 2019. But what I did say, I think, is 10 years from now, we're going to be better off, meaning higher prices.
Yeah.
Because, Vancouver is still a relatively constrained market, but more importantly, I mean, by mountains and water, but more importantly, we have governments in the region that basically are anti-supply, right? We've taken a bunch of measures to manage demand, absolutely nothing to help improve supply.
Yeah.
And when you have no new supply, it's still a pretty nice place to live, right? So there's going to be demand for it, and that, I think, drives that underlying confidence.
Right.
Things go wrong around the world all the time, seems more so lately. And when that happens, by comparison, only by comparison, our government is not quite so bad. So that attracts people, right?
How are we doing on comments?
We got another question here. So there's 21 people in the room right now. Another question from C2009Y. Second question is, do you think the increase in the Strata insurance, which will transfer to the condo owners, will affect the housing prices? This is the $1 million question right now, C2009Y. And
we should quickly say we have a insurance broker on the podcast, not this week, but next week.
Next week, we already talked to him, and it's not great news. Spoiler alert here, not great news. Do you have any thoughts on that? I mean,
have you been following the insurance?
So that reminds me of a discussion I had on Manhattan versus Vancouver once, and I said, well, Manhattan is not as expensive, it's cheaper than Vancouver, right? It was at the time per square foot with the exchange rate it was cheaper. And then someone pointed out, well, it's cheaper, but you have $2,000 or $3,000 a month maintenance fee, right? Because the buildings are older, you have a doorman and an elevator, and you're paying these huge fees, and so that's why it's cheaper, because you're committed to. So that increasing insurance premiums will have the same impact, right? So people basically figure out what their monthly payment is, what is the maximum they can afford, and then they go to the bank and say, with this monthly payment total, what kind of property can I afford? Well, if insurance includes, the insurance component of that monthly payment increases, then what can go towards the property decreases. There's no question about it. Now, I mean, you have an insurance expert, so they'll tell you more about the causes of this spike. But that aside, if we take it as given, yeah, that's going to be absolutely a negative on the condo market, yeah.
Just with the carrying costs. And for anyone who doesn't know or hasn't heard about the spike in insurance costs, it's basically that Strata Insurance is going through, the premiums are going up significantly, like to the tune of 200-300%. The water deductibles are going up very significantly in a lot of cases, which so the Strata Insurance is more expensive, but then on this personal side, your personal insurance is going to be more expensive because you have to cover, if you have water damage and the water deductible is $150K when it used to be 15, obviously, your insurance is going to go up. So we're seeing
we talk about it on the show, but there is one building in Yaletown that will remain nameless that just had their deductible go up to $600,000, and now none of the Strata owners can actually get a rider to cover that deductible. No insurance. So if they were to trigger the building deductible, they can't actually, they don't even have their insurance that will step in to cover the building deductible.
So it's like not having.
It's literally
it's like, what do? Do you file for bankruptcy? Do you, like, what if you create a leak and you have a $600,000 deductible that falls back on you from the Strata?
Do you declare bankruptcy?
And I like the way you say create a leak. You're not creating the leak.
No.
It's shoddy construction. Or
unless you hang
whatever,
a towel,
right?
on a sprinkler head,
right? So if a leak happens to you, I think that's what we should say.
Yeah.
So, but here's, I have a kind of broader question about that, because it's like we've been kind of running through the possibilities of, like, what does this look like, right?
Yeah.
Is the insurance, let's call it a crisis? Is the insurance crisis the new leaky condo crisis, without the ability to actually suss out, because if you have 2 leaks in the coming year, your insurance is, you're hooped. You can't actually look at each building specifically and go, this is a leaky condo, this has a rain screen technology, this one's a leaky condo. Yeah. So you don't have the ability to, you can look at the insurance certificate, and you can look at the claims history. But in a year, that can dramatically change. You have somebody who has two leaks, right? So is this the new crisis for Vancouver real estate? And also, our understanding of it, or at least my understanding of it, is because this is happening because the risk is too great. Companies are losing money. Most insurers do not want to enter into this market. Mm-hmm. Is there a market-based solution?
Yeah.
Dr. Andrey Pavlov. And before we say that, we should say to the group, we have 26 people watching. Any thoughts on this Strata Insurance? What's it going to do to the market? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Secondly,
is anyone going through this where their premiums have gone up, or are you concerned about the buildings that you're in?
Great question. So we'd love to see you in the comments. The other thing is, 26 people watching. We're new to this whole YouTube thing, but we're over halfway through. We're over halfway through the show. So I should say, if you like what you're seeing, subscribe to our channel here. We're trying to grow this thing. We're trying to have useful and informative conversations with very intelligent people. So a thumbs up, any comments, or subscribe, that would be great. But now let's get back to market-based solutions for market-based problems.
So I don't know what works, but I'll tell you what doesn't work. So in the US, there's government-subsidized flood insurance. And it sounds like a great idea, right? Because people experience similar type of insurance premiums and deductibles and that kind of stuff. And what that has caused is people to keep building in flood areas where floods happen every 2 or 3 years.
Right.
And it's like, why wouldn't you if your flood insurance is subsidized? So government intervention in this is not the solution. That's that I can.
Well, that's what we were thinking
with
about.
a high degree of certainty. Now, what's the market solution? Well, I mean, insurance companies may be losing. I don't know. Your insurance expert next time will tell us about it, but they're not losing that much. So I think over time we need to make sure that any insurance company can come and enter this market.
Yeah.
And as long as there's abnormal profits there, that will be competed away with just allowing more competition. Now that doesn't help the short term, right? That's going to happen
more like
in the
a
next
5
year.
year. That's like a 5 year window,
exactly.
right?
So yeah, that's tough. But regulating insurance or providing starting a public insurer like ICBC or something like that will make a bad situation worse.
But it's kind of interesting because we have the dumpster, quote unquote, dumpster fire of ICBC, and now it seems like we have the dumpster fire of the market. Yeah, it's a tough racket, I guess.
Yeah. It is tough because insurers, especially in that kind of situation, don't make that much money. So it's just kind of like not worth it to them to take the risk.
Right.
But I do think 300% increases like we're seeing, that's too much. That's going to create profits, and that will generate interest from insurers to enter this market.
Yeah, interesting.
C2009Y works in the insurance industry.
Mm-hmm.
He says we got it wrong. No, he said, I work in the insurance industry, and it's cyclical. The market is hardening, but it does take time to correct.
Well, thank you. That's what I think. Hopefully the correction will come soon, because, if you're struggling to meet ends, right, and you own a condo, you can now, for no reason, you can now find yourself on the street. It's a bad situation.
Absolutely.
And I remember...
Not a ton of press. Like, also, it feels like it was in the paper, but it feels like a bigger problem that a lot of people aren't talking about.
I don't know.
And a lot of people that are condo owners don't, I think, understand the magnitude of it. So
it's...
anyways.
Yeah, it's scary times.
So I'll tell you a business idea, I think, here is to create a construction company that will provide the insurance and also do the repairs. Right? Because that way, the problem right now is the insurer pays top dollar when the repairs come, because the homeowner doesn't care how much it costs, right? When it exceeds their deductible. So there's a bit of an issue there. So you buy or create a construction company that will come and do the work, and that's the insurance you get. Will come and fix your problem. To a reasonable standard, right? You're not going to hold us to everything perfect. Reasonable standard, and in exchange, we're going to give you a much better deal on the insurance.
You're going to see Matt and I on Shark Tank here next week. That's good. That's good. Any other questions here?
Here's the one I wanted to read. Imperator says, the increase in insurance is not a good thing at all and will probably drive more people who own a condo to buy detached.
Mm-hmm. If they can
swing it, I think you're right.
Do you think that's
he's correct, or she, that one of the major advantages of owning a single-family home is you can choose to defer maintenance.
Right.
So sure, the roof needs to be replaced, but it doesn't need to be replaced right now, right? Usually you can defer for a year or two. Now, you defer for too much longer, that's a problem. Then you end up with one of those low-quality properties we discussed earlier, right? But you have some flexibility, and that's hugely valuable to a property owner.
Okay. Okay, so we got two other comments in. I think we got to go back to some other questions before. But Haram Lee says, if people do want to live in Vancouver in the long term, they would still buy into the market regardless of the increase in insurance?
Well, but that's fine if it's just a matter of higher premiums, right?
Yeah.
But the moment it becomes a matter of $600,000 deductible, like the example you gave, you may want to live in Vancouver, but if something happens, you're out. Right?
And you might be bankrupt. Like you might have to declare bankruptcy.
So that's the bigger issue. It's the premiums and I know people are struggling, and premiums are not a small issue. But I do think that the deductibles and the inability to insure, that's really what's going to kill it.
So the premium that I saw in a normal kind of situation, as far as I understand it, their water deductible increased 900%. Their premiums meant they were going to have their Strata fees go up 20%, which on $300 is not necessarily, it's not a small amount, but it's presumably most people can survive. You have a little bit of a buffer there. But the other thing Imperator was saying, or sorry, not Imperator, but Haram Lee, he said they're going to buy regardless, but for people who are looking into this market to invest, they might not, which is...
But the other thing I would be concerned about, and I'm curious if you guys have thoughts about this, but just lenders now demanding to see the insurance certificate of a building and potentially blacklisting certain buildings that have really, really high deductibles.
Well, that's always been the case. Every lender always says you need to have property insurance in my name, right? Not in the owner's name.
Yeah.
You need to name the lender as the named insured, right?
Yeah.
And that's understandable because they need to protect their investment. If the thing falls tomorrow, well, they're relying on that property to recover any losses. But yes, you're right. So then if you can provide that insurer, how do you borrow?
Well, but this is the thing, right? Because I mean, now, like, we have so many buildings in Vancouver that are going through, say, envelope work. And you can't get financing on the building because, now the lender wants to see a depreciation report or a Form B or whatever.
Or a certificate of completion.
Or a certificate of completion.
Good luck with
So
that,
now if there's you want to see the insurance certificate and it says that there's even a $250,000 water deductible.
Well, but even 100 used to be like...
Well, 100 used to be something that would prevent people from buying in buildings. Like Mondrian, like how many deals have we had fall apart in buildings, in certain buildings in Yaletown that used to have like $100,000 water deductible?
Well, and they still...
Now that sounds like a pretty reasonable deductible. Almost in this market.
That's a storm you can weather.
So having said that, if the market is recovering like it looks like it is, then that creates a bit more comfort to the lenders because prices will be higher in the future, right? So they might not be quite as strict as they are in a flat or down market. Right. Because in a flat or down market, in a flat market, the down payment the person makes, that's their equity, that's their protection, that's it. In an up market, well, it's that down payment plus hopefully some appreciation. So then that loan is a little safer for the lender. And then, I hate to say it, but we only have 6 major banks, right? So alternative lenders can fill that void.
Yeah. So the market will make up for it.
So I mean, obviously, again, in the short run, that will be a problem, right? In the long run, we'll find a solution. But in the short run, I hear you. That's a major.
It's especially for people you think in the last 5 years that just stretched to get into the market, and now they're getting hit.
Do we have more questions? Because I want to make sure we get to assess values before.
Okay. Well, wait. We got a couple more here. So Jeff Man 8000 says, "I'm scared now."
Sorry, we didn't want to create panic here, but
we didn't want to say the new leaky condo crisis is upon you.
But in all fairness, we went through the leaky condo crisis. Right? There was a solution at the end, right? It cost people a ton of money, right? But it's not like it forced people out of their homes. I don't think that ever happened. Did that ever happen?
It did. I had a babysitter who had to declare bankruptcy because she got hit with.
Okay, so it did happen.
It did happen. Unfortunately, it did happen a little bit. I mean,
you would imagine though, based on the fact that almost every building went up 50 to 300% increases. I think you would imagine that there will be some immediate action once repercussions come. Like you would think actually that there might be some government intervention, perhaps.
Yeah. So
you'd imagine.
And I know you don't think that's going to be
that's the right answer.
But would you think that? Like I'm just thinking how far does crisis mode?
What would you do? So if we limit the the amount of increase, then no insurer will touch this market ever, right? Yeah. So we cannot do that. We could set up a nice CBC type insurance. There's only 2 or 3 that
want to do it right now.
Right? There's only 2, right, exactly. So could it be that we use some of the property taxes to subsidize the deductible, right? So that's the flood insurance in the US.
Yeah.
So sure, except, our property taxes are already high. I don't know is that going to make things worse, right? And more importantly, at least now you have some incentive for at least new construction to make sure that that's perfect, right?
Yeah.
There's no issue with any water because you're on the hook for that, right? If the moment we introduce some kind of subsidy, then people are not going to care, and then we're back into shoddy construction, which, it's we're gonna repeat the problem. We're gonna make it worse.
One thing that, and this is just going back to Haram Lee's comment about investors not wanting, it's going to scare off a lot of investors. In one building, I was reading Strata documents in the last week, and it was a high rise, and they were talking about potentially putting in. It was mainly owner occupied, but they were talking about putting in a rental restriction. And
because of the deductible.
because the impression that it was usually tenants that had leaks. And I wonder, that's an interesting kind of down the line where buildings are just, because
severe leaks, I think. So not notifying the correct channels if there was a leak, I think, is often the concern in stratas. So for example,
with a tenant.
With a tenant. Yeah. So like a toilet's leaking, but you'll notice it, but you just don't notify the landlord, right?
And I've had tenants that think they're doing you a favor. Nah, don't worry, we're fine with that. And it's like, well, no, believe me, like, that's not don't do me any favors here. Like, you got a leak. Come on.
You gotta notify the landlord.
But that's an interesting thing. So if a bunch of stratas move towards rental restrictions, and the empty homes tax doesn't apply to. Units can be left vacant then if there's a rental restriction against renting.
Right? So that's going to change about a year or two from now, right?
Coming up, right, okay. So anyway, just I'm wondering, I haven't thought through, I'm literally thinking out loud here, but I wonder what the implications are. Anyway, we should get back to the questions because we want to get to, hey, Jeff Man 8000 said, should I sell my condo and upgrade to a Burnaby duplex because of the insurance?
Oh no. Well, hold on.
Wait till next step. Wait till we have the insurance guy on before you make any decisions.
Right. Don't make any decisions quite yet. But there is a good point that, I've been advocating sort of gentle density, mixed density, high rises are great for all kinds of reasons, but we also should have, basement suites and laneway houses, and I think that's a good thing because, well, for one, it addresses this one problem, but it also addresses many other problems.
Dale Fair says, if Harry and Meghan move to Vancouver, this is very timely. If Harry and Meghan, for those of you who don't know, they're the Royals. The Royals. Yeah. Will it have a similar effect as Expo 86 and the Olympics? Vancouver in the spotlight, etc. World-class city.
That's a great point.
Do you think they'll live in East Van?
Fingers crossed.
That's actually,
Fraserhood.
That's a fantastic, point. I never thought of that. First of all, I thought they were looking on the island.
I thought they were going to Victoria, but
look, if they move to somewhere in the middle of nowhere, that place will have a benefit. Vancouver is already on the map. People know what Vancouver is. Sure. I just can't imagine that will make much of a difference.
It'll reinforce the brand.
Right. Yeah.
Now the Expo and the Olympics are very different, right? So that's like some serious construction and infrastructure, and
Yeah. Much more than the red carpet.
Okay. They're more than the red carpet. Come on. Okay, so let's go to. You wanted to get to assessments. I think everybody's concerned, or I feel like I'm talking to a lot of people.
Thoughts on
about their assessments.
Thoughts on assessed
values.
That
would be the thing. Thoughts on assessed values. Actually, I've talked to a couple people where their assessed values went up, and they're actually challenging them. Did your assessed values go up or down? What are your thoughts on them? Did they reflect in your understanding of the market in which you live? Do they reflect accurately on where the market's at, or even where the market was at 6 months ago when they were actually assessed? But you had a question.
I have a question for Andrey. Yeah, I'm just curious what you think of taxing or our taxation and assessed values and working on the value model. Specifically.
Yeah, I think it's a terrible idea that we use assessed value to determine the tax burden.
And can we just talk about kind of just back up and how assessed value leads to how much tax you're paying and the mill rate and just the way it works first?
Sure. So the city has a budget which is inflating every time, and in fact this year it went up 7%. It was going to go up 9%. Right. So it goes up much faster than inflation every time. And then so that's the budget, and we're going to have to distribute this among the property owners. So the assessed value only determines how that total cost of running the city is distributed among the property owners. So if it doesn't matter if your assessment went up or down, the only thing that matters is whether it went up or down relative to everyone else.
Right.
So if it went up relative to everyone else, even though everyone else went down, that's your taxes are going to go up. So if your assessment went down less than everyone else, your taxes are going to go up.
Right.
So people are excited, people say, oh, my assessment went down a little or a lot, and now I'm going to pay less taxes. No, not at all. And in fact, given my history with government, I'm pretty sure I'll end up paying more, not less. I don't remember the last time I paid less about anything. But that aside, what you just said, some people are appealing and concerned in this and that. So using the assessed value creates uncertainty. I don't know how much my property tax will be next year and the year after and the year after, on top of the uncertainty created by City Hall through the somewhat random and large increases. So, I keep saying we shouldn't use assessed value at all. We should use living space. We should really use physical characteristics of a property, but we want to keep it simple, so just use living space, because living space approximates the cost of services used a lot better. Now, ideally, we should really use people, not space, but it's hard to know who lives where, right? That's impossible. So living space is a proxy of how many people live in that place, and then that approximates the services you consume. The bigger the place, the more police and the more fire you consume.
So it's almost like a unit entitlement model?
Yes, rather than assessed
But if
value.
I understand, if you have, let's say, 3,000 square feet on Point Grey Road with a view and built in 2018, and it's worth, I don't even know, that's outside the market.
It's worth, it's a lot less.
Let's say $5-6 million or whatever, and then you have 3,000 square feet in Maple Ridge, and it's maybe worth $700K. Now, I know it's a different jurisdiction, but based on that idea, you're saying that they should be the same tax.
Well, if they're the same size, does the property with a view on Point Grey Road, does that consume more city services? And it does not. If anything, if it's brand new, it has better fire protection, better alarm. If anything, it consumes less city services, right? So if both properties are using the same level of city services, and by that I mostly mean police and fire, those are the two big items in the city budget, then they should be paying the same. You don't want someone else to pay your bill, do you?
So what you're basically saying is it's the model we're using now based on value kind of creates an inherent wealth tax.
Yes, and it does, and it creates uncertainty. So my issue is with the uncertainty, because uncertainty is terrible. Then when you're budgeting, you've got to allow for the worst possible case. It's a bad idea. Now, I know it's popular, but it's a bad idea. So using living space is going to create certainty, because living space doesn't change. It only changes when you renovate or redevelop, but then you're going to know about it. And you're going to budget for it. But most importantly, it matches the cost of services used to what you're using.
So maybe we should throw it out. I'd be curious to hear anyone. We got 28 people watching right now.
All right.
Shout out to Secret, who couldn't actually come today because
he's the guy writing the questions.
He's writing the questions.
He
couldn't get in with the snow. But shout out. Thanks for adding the questions, Secret.
But here's another question for you. Should 1,000 square feet worth $500,000 pay the same as 1,000 square feet worth $5 million in the city of Vancouver? Is that fair? Is it unfair? What do you think? I feel like I'm becoming Charles Adler here.
Nobody knows.
That's maybe we're too old. But we'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that. We're actually getting down to the wire here.
Yeah,
7:57.
Ramy, how are we doing on time, by the way? We're
It's 7:57.
7:57. Oh, we got a little bit of time here left. So any other comments, Matt, about anything?
No, I think the insurance was the one that really got everybody going here.
The assessments didn't.
Let's end on predictions, because I feel like everybody likes predictions, and I also feel like, Andrey, I don't know if you gave us a prediction when you were on the show.
But we should say your where's the best opportunity in Vancouver for purchasers of real estate? I think you said detached as far west as you can go.
I don't know if I did say detached. What I think I said was detached with the most
Amount
possible
of land.
Yes.
Most amount of
So
land.
yeah, I mean, to the extent that parcels in the west are bigger, sure, but actually I don't think west or east is. In fact, I think east is better because you're more connected then and closer to the rest of the region.
Right.
But that aside, yes, the things I feel strongly about is, single detached, and then the most land you can afford, And then if you can't, the closer you get to that, the better.
What do you say to people that just look at a snapshot of the market, say the last they bought 3 years ago, and their house has not really increased in value, but they've watched condos kind of go through the roof?
2017 was a tragic year for single family homeowners.
But is the
Fantastic! So it's even cheap. It's cheap now. Then. It's a good deal.
But I take it you mean like as a long-term hold.
That's right. You have to hold it for 20, 30 years, and
you'll win on land, though, is the point.
You'll win on land, because land is we're going to get density one way or another. The city.
We have to.
City Hall is going to get over itself and allow the construction that people want to make occur.
Yeah.
But land is a little hard. We have unused land, quite a bit of it, but I don't see the political situation in which we allow development on that land. So then land is going to become.
So we got 2 more comments here, but just on the predictions front, just to get super specific, and we'll go around the room.
I know that name. That's I think an agent, Adam.
No, Aiden.
Aiden,
Sprower.
yes.
Hello,
Yeah,
Aiden.
sorry, my eyes
and
are
hello,
horrible,
Iraq's blood, our oil. We'll get to both your comments in a minute. Go around the room. July 1st, 2020. Which property type is going to see the biggest increase and the biggest or decrease, I guess, which is just increase. Let's assume there's going to be potential increases here. We don't want to talk about decreases. I think we can say that's the luxury market, right? Let's say if there's increases, which property type is going to see the biggest increase?
Gosh, can we do 2030, July 2030? That might feel much more comfortable. Much more comfortable than July 2020.
Yeah, July 2020.
So much subject to what people do.
I would do it by price band. I mean, the entry level of each submarket, I think, is going to see the biggest uptick right now. The absolute entry level of each price band. I think if you're shopping, what we're noticing right now is sales ratios are highest at the lower end of each submarket. And that's where all the pressure is. That's where most of the multiple offers are. And I think there's a lot of pressure in those markets. So whether you're buying an entry-level detached home in East Van or the West Side, or whether you're buying a condo, downtown, East Van, West Side, beyond, but it's at a price point that's going to be more competitive in the entry level. In the local market, I think that's where there's going to be a lot of demand. So.
Well said. And one thing I would just say is single family is back. Entry-level single family, it is busy out there right now.
And actually, the mid-range is starting to get busy again too in most markets. But
that would have been my prediction. Yeah. So entry-level single family, small lots, busy streets. That's gonna take the most.
Well, it's definitely there's definitely multiple offers in that case. There's of course a bunch of questions right at the end here.
How are we doing, Ramy?
Good, yeah.
Okay, so we
ask people if they want you to stick around longer.
well, let's just.
It doesn't cut us off? I thought it was just like a hard
I can
stop.
cut you off if you want.
It was like Cinderella. I'm going to turn into a pumpkin.
Have two more of those.
Aiden Sprower says, your thoughts. Look at this, dry January.
Dry January.
Holier than thou. Aiden Sprower says, your thoughts on Renfrew, Vancouver East detached market? I think it's set to pop off. There is nothing.
What did he say?
Your thoughts on Renfrew, Vancouver East detached market?
Oh man, I think Renfrew honestly is one of the most undervalued, the best areas in East Van, and I love Renfrew. I think it's a great.
You used to live in Renfrew.
I used to live at Slocan and Turner, and I think that Hastings corridor has, like, right along the entire Hastings corridor, has huge opportunities coming up over the next decade. And I think we're just scratching the surface of what Hastings has to offer. And I think Renfrew, I think Hastings East, so on the north side, like between Nanaimo and Renfrew, that's a great pocket. And good value over there, and overlooked by a lot of people that want to be in Fraser and Maine and other parts.
And the entry price is cheaper, right? You can still get 125, 1.3, half
decent post-war bungalows,
house, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the market to watch. I think that's set to pop. The problem is right now specifically, there's very little inventory, and the stuff that's out there is either not good at all or it's priced, 100 to 200K over where it should be.
And one thing actually about, we talked a little bit, Andrey, about this last time, but I also think from a redevelopment perspective, I think that pocket in East Van, I'd love to see you and Tom do a which sub-market is most open to multifamily zoning and development. That would be an amazing paper.
I think that's one thing we'll agree on, because we have this paper on laneway houses and the impact of laneways on the neighbors.
Yeah.
And we find that the impact of a laneway house on the neighbors is pretty negative on the west side.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But not at all negative, and in fact positive in some cases on the east side.
Could you stretch that to multifamily, do you think?
Well, so that's a bit of a tricky thing, because the nice thing about laneway houses is that they're all over the place. So you've got a lot of properties where you have a laneway and all the properties where you don't.
Yeah.
The moment you go into high-rises, there's just so much fewer projects, so that doesn't give you enough observations. And also those projects are not at random.
Right.
They're in specific places.
Right.
With specific characteristics, so we don't know whether the price change in the neighbors we observe is due to the project or due to those other characteristics. Laneways are fairly random. We check that in the paper, and so according to that conclusion, you should have density in East Van. It's in a relatively lower priced area.
So there's been a flurry of questions here. One thing, Doug, I just realized Doug Allen.
Hey, Doug.
Friend of the show. He's asked this question twice. We'll get to you, Doug, because I missed him the first time around. But Iraq's blood, our oil. The population is graying. How will this impact the market in the future? We just had a podcast on this in the States about boomers and okay, boomer, who's gonna buy your house?
6
right?
million homes or whatever.
No, it was 20. Well, in the States, it was way more than 6 million.
Well, what was there's actually a stat that was the boomer stat was that, what was it, 30% or around 30% of homes in the U.S. are going to be coming on the market
in the next 20.
Yeah, in the next 10 or 20
what
years.
She described it as like a slow-moving crisis, where in the next 10 years we're going to start seeing an influx of not only homes when people are either dying or moving into assisted care, but homes nobody wants anymore. These suburban giant homes,
50+
the cultures,
communities.
in the Sun Belt, and what does this mean when there's no where they're not where the center of economic activity is, and what is that? It's like a slow-moving crisis, right? And the same thing's going to happen in Canada. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Well, except Florida and Texas and Arizona and Nevada are the 4 biggest recipients of population in the U.S.
Yeah.
And the states that are moving are really further north, right? They're losing.
Right.
So Chicago, right? So I don't know. It depends. It all depends where your house is. Sure, if you have a house on Lake Michigan, yeah, that's not going to do very well. But if you have a house in Florida, despite the hurricanes and all that, that seems to be doing just great.
Yeah. Well, and in shifting that to Vancouver, I mean, I think what we've literally seen in the city of Vancouver, right, is this is the east-west divide, and why East Van is at a price point that's at least is a lot easier to get into. It's still very challenging, but it's younger, it's dynamic, and that's we're seeing kind of that the graying is happening primarily on the west side, and how that
And my beard.
But yeah, I mean, how that impacts the west side specifically, because that's what I've been seeing, right? Is that kind of seniors, West Van too, same thing. It's like there's certain communities that I think have huge impacts on those communities, but for the most part, it's the people that have lived there a long time are all getting up in age, and presumably there's going to be over the next 10 to 15 years a glut of houses on the west side that are estate sales.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, but hopefully they're going to be able to be redeveloped, right? So that's the hope. And then you see pockets, Kerrisdale is one, where you see a flurry of commercial activity, right? There's, stores locating and this and that, and a whole bunch of young people. The schools on the west side are full, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like this is a desert neighborhood, right?
No, absolutely not.
So as long as we allow enough density there to support all these businesses moving in, it's going to be fine.
Weather the storm,
Yeah.
if a storm actually exists. Aiden Sprower says, detached market is still somewhat slow. How long do you think it will last? Do you think spring 2020 will be the rebound? I feel like we covered that. I think he wrote that before we said that.
Doug Allen's got a question.
I think, hold on. Hi boys, great show, Aiden Sprower. Thanks. We got to see 2009Y says, amazing show. I've been a listener for a couple years now. Keep up the great work. Thank you very much. Dale Fair, great show, very entertaining too. I think people are ready to check out. We still got 29 people in the room though. Doug Allen, finally Doug. Apologies that I missed you the first time around. Does City Council, is this the same question, Doug? Because you had let's just see, because your question up here was, what do you think the Squamish, what?
Ramey's given us the,
wrap it up. Really? Wrap it up? Okay, this will be the last question. What do you think the Squamish Towers south of the Burrard Bridge do to set a precedent for high-rise density outside downtown? Does City Council leverage to approve more rental or condo tower density?
I love it.
Great question.
I love what they're doing. I think every property owner in Vancouver should be able to do exactly the same thing. Let's double and triple the size of Vancouver over the next 10 years. That will make housing affordable.
Maybe we'll leave it there. This is. So thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll have another one posted for next month.
Yeah, we're
Vancouver
coming back.
Real Estate Live, and thank you so much to our guest, Professor of Finance Andrey Pavlov. Really appreciate you coming out, and check out RameyFilms.com.
Live at the Bento Box. We're live.
Yeah,
right now at the Bento Box.
RameyFilms.com. Ramey, thank you so much for letting us use your space and going overtime. And
one other thing I should just say, Thomas Lamb, sorry we missed your question there. But last, not least, if you like what we're doing here, we're having a lot of fun. We're going to do this continuously, month over month here. But please hit like, hit subscribe. We're trying to grow this thing. It's a work in progress. We really appreciate you coming out, and have a good night, and drive safe.
All right, well, thank you, Andrey. That was great.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
And looks like people are active. I love it. Not just kind of